Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the very first Public Works meeting for 2024. We're here and it's Thursday, January 4th, 2024. And call to order, we've got a roll call, myself, Councilmember Swarthout and Councilmember Althauser here today. We'll go ahead and approve the minutes for the December 7th meeting. I'll probably take a vote, just approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, second. All right. And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so approve the minutes. Now we're on to Dan Smith, and this is small works contract with J.A. Morris Construction for the tenant improvements for City of Tumwater office space at South Puget Sound Community College. That is the longest title. Thank you, Dan.
I was thinking the exact same thing when I was putting the presentation together last night. So,
well, and then 60 pages of this packet is that contract, I think, right? Or maybe 75.
Yeah, a good amount.
Yeah.
Actually, probably all of it, because the next item really is just discussion. So not much there for digestion. But yeah, this is. I mean, it's a long contract. It's our standard public works small works contract. But the project itself and the presentation itself should be fairly straightforward and short. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you and make sure we've got the right presentation showing. If I look at and found a new trick today to determine what you guys can see. So looks like you guys can see the right screen. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the tenant improvement small works contract with J.A. Morris. And as you are aware, this is relative to to our move over to South Puget Sound Community College for the Water Resources Administrative Division. So what's being done? Well, we're basically taking two classrooms and kind of a service area between those classrooms and converting those into workspaces. And so using my little highlighter pen to kind of show you some of the areas. What you can see here on the picture in the upper left-hand corner is basically what the classroom looks like today on both sides. There are cabinets, there are large science desks. One of the contract or one of the proposals in the contract, which we decided not to go with because they weren't cost effective, was were we able to reutilize these cabinets or these desks in some fashion, because they are that nice hard granite tabletops that you normally find in a science classroom that we could use for maybe our workspace area. But the way the cabinets were constructed is really not a feasible option for us. So the vent hoods you see here, those are being removed. All the cabinetry, some where we can reuse, will be reused, but most of this will be removed as well. The flooring will be replaced. It will be actually basically covered over to keep costs minimal. And there are some areas where you can kind of see here along this line there is a kind of a gas line area which we'll be maintaining, but we'll be covering over to make it more functional in a workspace. So basically what you see here is there's two small offices as you walked into the building number 32 over at SPSCC campus. There was an entrance to this classroom. So these two large areas were the two classrooms. There was an entrance here that's being removed, and a solid wall is going to be placed over there. So that way we can create a lobby type environment for folks that do come to visit the office. This will be an appointment only office. So folks can drop in, but we're going to be not necessarily on the City Hall campus. It won't be easy necessarily to find us. So it'll be by appointment only generally. But if folks do drop in, Bonnie would meet them there at the counter. And then she would escort them back into the office spaces where we would have for our staff and our managers. You go through the back door over here. The main staff entrance would be the back door of the offices here, and these come in from the outside. Some concrete improvements are being proposed here to connect those to the sidewalk. So there is a contiguous sidewalk into the back offices for the staff. On the workspace side, a wall is being constructed to bisect that classroom basically. On this side, we'll have area for reviewing maps, for doing water quality tests, setting up for field procedures, anything that we need to do out in the field, storage of field equipment, monitoring equipment, et cetera, for both stormwater and our wellhead protection programs. Those would be stored here. This would be our kind of our workspace. We also have in this workspace area kind of 3 remote desk space areas for staff that as we grow as a team, field staff, we have folks visiting from out of either over at City Hall. IT might need to come over do some work, and they would have a workstation to be able to work at. Through this bisecting wall, there will be a door into a conference room. This conference room would be would be large enough for all of our team meetings, plus any other larger meetings we would need to have. We're also convert one of these smaller meeting spaces, like you see right here on the upper right-hand corner, converting one of those into a smaller private meeting space. Should someone need to have a quiet Zoom room, to zoom in on a meeting or something along those lines, they have a more quiet, more reserved space to be able to do that versus kind of more in this open cubicle format, which we recognize today creates a lot of challenges for folks trying to conduct a Zoom meeting with folks all around you talking or whatever. So we have that, which could also convert into a private office, maybe coming up for a visit. These are the bathrooms. We're not proposing any fixes in there or any improvements in there. Those are just open to the public. They're open to the school. I would add that the school has indicated there are no other uses for this building at this time. So just adjacent to the places that are under lease is also another large classroom, so could benefit our education program, or should we do large trainings for our stormwater crew or any of our crews that we currently do some training work for, city level trainings, we could discuss with the school about renting out that space in addition for that work to be done. And last but not least, this picture on the lower left-hand side really is kind of where our employee break area is going to be. And so these counters will be converted into more kind of a appropriate space for a lunchroom. We have common amenities in there. There would be a dishwasher. There would be a sink, as you can see, refrigerator for holding refrigerable items, foods and lunch bags, things like that. And then just to the north of that, we'd have an area where our copier and our photocopier equipment would be, as well as our IT servers, equipment like that would be there as well. So fairly full service, everything we need in one space for us. As we contemplate future growth, like I said, we have a couple of spaces. And we should be able to accommodate for the next few years. Looking farther beyond that might get a little tighter, which again, kind of a saving grace is that there's no other uses planned for this building. And so there could be some opportunities for us to expand, whether it's just our division or other divisions within the city as well that might need some additional space. There might be some opportunity there. We're also looking at some newer alternatives. I mentioned we're looking at some different flooring. The carpeting that we'd be looking at in the workspace and in the conference room, or not the workspace, I'm sorry, but where the office spaces are and the conference room is going to be kind of a blend between these 3 carpets that you see here. Really trying to add a little bit of style. And they are just as affordable as just regular, if we were just to go with a regular non-decorative style carpet. This blue kind of water drop pattern would be utilized in the conference room as well as the manager's office. The kind of moss brick kind of trying to mimic at the building itself. There is a kind of a geogrid parking area right behind the building, which basically allows for grass to grow through a hardened structure for parking a vehicle on. This is trying to kind of match that, and the 3 would blend together with this carpet, which would run primarily through the entire space with just some accents by these spaces. We're also working with Windfall Lumber in Tumwater to provide some accent panels for the lobby area. So you can see down here on the bottom image, there is one wall would be fully made, or these panels would be hung on the wall with a kind of a metal sign for Water Resources Sustainability that would indicate our department, but the panels themselves are reutilized I'm forgetting the word right now, but they're basically the wood pallets. I'm sorry, they're wood pallets from basically Africa, South America, Central America, and they're repurposed. They're sanded and finished, and you can kind of see they have the kind of the use marks, which shows we're recycling the wood for for that work. And so one panel, as you can see down here in the lobby, an entire wall would be made of that, and the accent would be brought into the receptionist, or not receptionist, administrative assistant's desks for that there. And of course, we would have a City of Tumwater logo, not only on the wall, as you walk into the office, but also on the door. That would be with the glass. It'll be right on the glass door as well as you walk into the office. And then, throughout the remainder of the lunchroom and the workspace, that we would have, we were looking at using linoleum, which is environmentally preferred sustainable flooring approach. However, as I mentioned earlier, that would require removing all of the panels that are on the floor. And so as a cost saving measure, we chose a different type of flooring, which is really just kind of a modular flooring that has an interlocking interface and it just lays on top of that floor and kind of floats on top of that. But it is also an environmentally sustainable product. It's recycled laminate and would be a good option. It's used a lot in Europe, I understand, and has low VOCs and is fairly easy, particularly if there has to be any movement. As I mentioned, there was an underground gas line in one of the rooms. This would allow us for access to those panels without damaging the floor, because these panels could just be popped up and removed and allow access as needed. So we went through a standard process utilizing the MRSC small works roster for general contractors. We had pre-selected 6 local firms to submit proposals, ultimately notified 271 contractors on that list that this was out. We had an additional 10 through that notification to requested the full package. On November 13th, we did a walkthrough. We had about 4 or 5 contractors attend that walkthrough, asked lots of questions. We were out there for a number of hours, kind of looking up under the ceiling panels and going, into the electrical panels and, pulling up things in the floor just to make sure that everybody had a good idea of what was needed out there. And then it came down to it. The bid submittal was on November 29th, where we got 2 formal bids. The architect's estimate was $271,498. We had of the 2 bids, J.A. Morris was $273,094, and Pash Construction was $239,856. Unfortunately, the low bidder was not fully responsive to the request. There was a number of items that were excluded that we recognize as necessary to be included in the bid. And therefore their statement of values was basically inconsistent with the needs of the project. So J.A. Morris was fully responsive to the request. Their statement of values was consistent with the architect's estimate, participated in the walkthrough, and they had good experience with the SPSCC and our architect as a local firm, and also had strong references for the project and were selected to work with us on this project.
Dan, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So for Pash, that was low, but they weren't fully responsive. So if they were fully responsive, that bid probably would have had to have been higher, correct? Yeah, so the fact that it's significantly lower is due in part to the fact that it was not responsive.
Correct. One example is dealing with like sprinklers and overhead systems, and they didn't include any funds for that, and there is a recognized need for that. That we couldn't identify that in their bid, and follow-up questions. They did not indicate that was included. So, and
that's an expensive system,
right? So, we recognize that there were a number of items in that that we know needed to be addressed, and we didn't feel that were addressed. And so therefore, J. Morris really kind of had the full picture for what we needs, and was very close with the estimate on that one.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so therefore it brings to the final request that recommend City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign a small works contract with J.A. Morris Construction for the tenant improvements for a City of Tumwater office space at South Puget Sound Community College.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing in case there's any more questions.
Michael asked some of the ones that I had. So we've got, we allocated $500,000 in the budget for this. So are you indicating that we'll be just using 275 of this? Is that, or
Well,
will we be
there'll still be additional needs out there for furniture and some incidentals and things along those lines. And so, yeah, the full $500,000 is anticipated to be expended. It's just for the construction, the tenant improvement piece is 273,000 and change will be what we'll use for this portion of the project.
Okay.
And that $500,000 is also split between three funds, the water, sewer, and stormwater funds.
And then is this going to be, so we're leasing this for a year? Is this, is that part of the expenses too, as far as the, that's all wrapped into the 500,000? So we'll have like a yearly lease expenses?
The lease is separate. And
Okay.
I know the last budget amendment, Troy had captured some of that, and in the future budgets we will be allocating those costs. So the initial lease is a 5-year lease. We are under lease currently, and then we have an extension for another 5 years that we could amend as we reach the end of this initial term.
Okay.
So we anticipate there will be at least 10 years, likely 15 years, potentially more, that we'd be utilizing this space. So making the investment up front will serve us well for the future years to come.
Okay, well, good. And then the other one is you indicated that J.A. Morse is a local company, so I was curious. I thought I recognized the name. So okay. So. And the only other random thing is thank you for using Windfall for the wood, but I was just thinking, is there any wood left from the Trails End project when they took that down? So did we save anything from that? I wonder.
We talked to Windfall and the architect, and we talked with other folks to see if there would be some other options available to us, and they start to get more expensive when you start looking at, I forget what the term was. There was like recycling, and then there was like refurbishing different things. And as you start to look at large timbers and how you can cut those down, it becomes a lot more labor intensive, for that type of work. Really, the best option for us, for what our needs were at, in this building, really just to kind of reutilize those pallets.
Okay. Yeah, I get that part. I was just curious. Again, I know it's just a random question. Just wondering how much, if anything, was saved that we'll be able to use at the when we get the Public Works building up and running. So it's a little homage to what was there before.
Absolutely, I believe that there is some wood that is being looked at for extension there. Brandon probably have a better head. There he is.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
We are planning on utilizing some of the wood that was collected from the former facility. I believe the bulk of it is going to be in the main lobby area, but that's currently being looked at. So.
Okay. So no stall doors to cover your offices.
No.
So there are a lot of stall doors. All right, I'm sorry, I'm going down a different path here. All right, so we do have a recommended action in front of us.
Can I ask one more question really quick?
Of course, I'm sorry.
So Dan, can you I don't think I saw it on the slide. Can you remind me if we've sort of execute this contract in the way it's envisioned in terms of timeline? When would be the move-in date for the department to shift over there? Once it's
anything can happen with
ready
construction, and we were anticipating moving in back in August. So really what we anticipate, so once this executes, the timeline brings us out to April for construction to be complete with punch listing and finishing up some minor items through April into May. And so we anticipate we could probably move in as early as end of May, and then while they finish up their remaining items, and but most definitely in by May or mid-May at the latest. Fingers crossed.
Good to know. Well, good. All right. So Michael, do we recommend that the city council approve and authorize the mayor to sign a small works contract with J.A. Morse Construction for the tenant improvements for City of Tumwater office space at South Puget Sound Community College? Yes.
So moved.
Okay. All right. Let's move this to consent. All right.
Do we need to
take a vote?
Do the motion?
Okay. All right. Do you so move second?
Just for the record. Yeah. So
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion approved.
All right. Thank you for that.
So you're up again.
Up again, it's the Dan show this morning. This item you've already seen and approved. The Corolla Engineers Cost of Service Study is part of the contract we approved, I think, in December. Patrick Soderberg, our Water Resources Program Manager, brought this item forward in the context of a larger source of supply investigation, as well as cost of service study. And so they are just two distinct projects wrapped under one contract with Corolla. We wanted to bring this back to you today and really have more of a conversation around this specific piece of it. Councilmember, as you might remember, as we were adopting the water system plan and around the policies and some of the elements there around the financial items, there was a number of questions that came up, particularly I know that you had around equitability of water rates and connection fees. And Councilmember Swarthout, as we were discussing, you know, what all the implications of those were, looking forward as how well that these are covering our capital improvement programs and things like that. So this is really that was really the genesis, the adoption of that water system plan, the questions that came from Public Works Committee as well as other members of the community around metrics of how our water rates are defined, affordability metrics, things like that was the genesis of this project. Patrick and I are going to be meeting with Corolla here in the coming couple of weeks, and we just wanted to have a kind of a more in-depth conversation and really kind of go through what this was hoping to, at least a couple of the items that we're hoping to look at, from affordability and looking at rates and connections and connection fees, and you know, determining whether or not, you know, connection fees were equitable across the board, and I'll kind of get to the slides here. But as we go through this, please, you know, ask the questions, you know, what comes up for you, what would you want us to make sure that we're relaying to Corolla so that they could, you know, maybe do a little bit more in-depth analysis, give us the pros and the cons of an approach, you know, that kind of a thing. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll do that. We'll do that, and it looks like you can see the right one, which is excellent. So, you know, as Patrick had shared, this task 3, the cost of service study, is really looking at collecting our data, taking a snapshot in time of where we are at financially, looking at our budget. You know, we have a financial plan. As you know, when we adopt our capital improvement program, you know, there is a kind of a high level model that we use to determine you know, whether or not we can meet reserves as well as operational needs, you know, over the course of 6 years with the program that we have in place for capital improvements. They're going to help us develop a more refined model of our financial program that I would be able to use on a regular basis to plug in changes for projects or programs. You know, one of the things we recognized this past year as we were putting together the capital program was, you know, very significant cost increases due to inflation and other market influences that, you know, and for instance, our Southeast Reservoir project was originally scoped at about $9 million, and it's kind of coming in at $22 million. So a huge, significant increase on that. And what does that do overall to our fund balance? What does that do to our operational capacity? So we'll have at the end of this project, we'll have a kind of a model that we'll be able to utilize, you know, kind of plug in some of these changes and see in real time how we might need to, you know, look at, you know, rate changes, connection fee changes. And the intention really here is to get through this work over the next few months. That'll help try and inform as we walk into our budget process later this year. If some more significant changes need to be done, then we've already kind of conceived through that work. They'll be looking at our cost of service. How much does it cost to provide the operational, you know, to cover operations and our maintenance needs? And that's basically what our rates cover. And then, of course, documenting and presenting these the work that they're doing, and potentially considering some additional rate design alternatives. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So one of the questions that has come up recently is, well, what does affordability look like? Traditionally, water systems look at affordability using median household income, and they'll take the annual cost of the utility bills, water in this case, and they'll say, well, you know, you multiply that by 12 and say, okay, is that 2.5% or less? And if it is, they consider that considered an affordable rate. And so when you look at the median household income in Tumwater, it's $77,849 as of 2023. If you look at and what I've done is not only just look at our water utility, I also look at our entire utility bill. So you can see this kind of 2024 analysis. Let me get my laser pointer again. You kind of see this 2024 analysis that we've done over here. And this is basically utility costs. So that includes both stormwater and wastewater in addition to our water. You multiply that by 12, you get 1,479. 2.5% of 77 is 1946. So yes, one metric, and it's been traditionally used by water utilities or utilities in general, is to say, yes, that is an affordable rate for our community because it is less than 2.5% of the median household income. Well, when you look at that as compared to, a low income earner who might earn $31,200 in a year, that becomes a little bit less affordable. And so what we're proposing is through this process is to look at affordability in a different way. There's some work that's been done out of the Texas A&M University to kind of calculate affordability in a different way. And they're also looking at what are the other bills that a household might face and what might it look like from a minimum wage perspective. So there are two new formulas that can be applied in here. It basically says how many folks are living in a household, what is the income of that household, what are the other costs that household would face, and therefore what does that ratio look like? And so I want to caveat this chart here that you see that this is for presentation purposes only. I made some assumptions that might not necessarily, we might not use as we move forward with the formal analysis. But I want to do something kind of quick to kind of just show you, briefly what it looks like. So, again, we take that basic utility cost. Under a normal analysis, they're only looking at a single wage earner income. So this would have been the 31,000. To make this work in this sense, I utilized two wage earners at the minimum wage. So 62,400 is a household income. Breaks it down to a monthly income. And then it looks at, I took the United Way ALICE data for Thurston County for estimated monthly expenses. $4,757. There might be a different, as we start to really kind of dig into the how this affordability metric is calculated, we might use different numbers for that. But what that basically boiled down to is that we were able to kind of break it down to a ratio that says, yes, with 27.87 left of disposable income, this fit within the framework. And I don't have the ratio here, unfortunately, again, because the numbers itself, we're not necessarily making, we're not working together because I think our estimates here under ALICE, we're kind of throwing that off. So again, presentation only, but it's suggested that these rates were affordable as a full utility. So we'll look at this through the water system as both water utility costs as well as the full utility bill that most of our customers would be experiencing. And then the second metric is what does that look like from a minimum wage type work? And what that broke down to was about, it would take at a minimum for a minimum wage earner, it would be to pay the utility bill, it would take a minimum of 7.5 hours of minimum full-time minimum wage work to afford the utility bill. So on a 40-hour work week, this was within the appropriate ranges considered for utility bills for some of the metrics that we had been looking through this study. So that would be one of the elements that we're going to be asking Carollo to take a look at, and not just use kind of the affordability metric of median household income less than 2.5%. Yes, it's considered affordable because we do know that there is a range of customers within our community, and some actually living in the kind of the low income range of 31,000 down there and trying to afford utility bills. Another piece that we were going to be looking at, and we were talking about designing different rate structures, is that average versus essential use. A lot of our customers have irrigation systems, and we see their rates spike in the summertime. We don't look at irrigation as an essential use. That is not a life need. And so there are some models out there that consider a certain volume of water integrated within the base rate. And so for us right now, it's about $10, a little over $10 a month is a base rate. For the city customers, we would say, okay, is there opportunity to include, say, 100 gallons a day within that base rate, which make it upwards of, maybe 100 cubic feet over, integrating that into that base rate as a life model, and so that at a bare minimum, the water bill would always be just a flat $10 ish. So to speak. So we'll be evaluating, what are some different ways that we can approach providing water or ensuring the most vulnerable among us have water without having to see those kind of those consumption-based spikes that could happen, say, in summertime, because irrigation, things like that become choices. And where there is, when you're looking at essential life use, that is less of a choice than a need for some of our customers. The next piece that we want to look at is, again, equity and kind of rates and connections. What are our connection fees paying for the impacts of the users, most impactful users? Is growth theoretically paying for growth? Our rates are supposed to pay for our operation and routine maintenance, our treatment, asset replacement over time. And so that should be, a fairly consistent. Our system is going to grow, so you would expect growth in our water rates, from year to year, budget to budget. And the connection fees are supposed to help finance the future growth of our system. So the concept of growth paying for growth. How sufficient are they at providing a fund that our capital program can utilize? And they're also a payment into the existing infrastructure that has been constructed that they would be utilized, those new connections would be utilizing for our systems. So are these equitable? Is one subsidizing was one category, is rate subsidizing capital needs, is capital needs paying what it needs to pay to support the programs. Historically, our connection fees have increased about 2% with at each budget year. As you can see here, that's kind of flip-flopped out into the future years. And again, our rate model will also help inform what this needs to be and what this needs to look at. But as we were putting together the capital program this past year, recognizing that the largest projects, the most expensive projects, are all relating to growth and new source needs. And so, having a very low 2% increase on our connection fees while our water system rate increases fairly steadily over time, we flip-flop that. And so we increase the connection fees so that the connection fees would be paying more into the system as those projects started to come online. Such as the reservoir, Southeast Reservoir, as I had mentioned, that had gone from 9 million in the planning stages up to 25 million. You see here as a forecasted 6-year program, which also does include debt service in that. So it is still about 22 million there.
Dan, can I ask a question about connection fees?
Uh-huh.
So if I recall, the amount of the fee is based upon the potential use. So like a 12-inch connection is going to be far, far, far more expensive than a 2-inch, like a residential
Correct.
connection.
Yeah, so it's scale based on that.
So will the equity assessment kind of look at not just the size of that, but also the user? Like, it seems that if there's a 6-inch connection servicing, I don't know, a very large user, I guess I'm curious whether the equity aspect of that will be examined as well to a greater degree to distinguish between like an industrial user that needs a 12-inch connection versus well, I guess if you were a smaller user, you would just have a smaller pipe and a smaller connection.
Yeah.
But it sort of seems that I guess what I'm thinking about is like future users that are going to utilize a ton of water also put stress on the system downstream because at the end of the day, it is sort of a, all water is blue, so to speak, where we need water throughout the entire system. And I guess I've always sort of thought that the big users sort of still access an economy of scale for the fee that the residential user still sort of subsidizes to a certain degree. So is that sort of component going to be looked at, like the impact to a huge business that's a big user for a connection fee is probably less significant than the impact to someone who just wants to build an ADU and needs to connect it to the system in terms of a percentage is what I'm trying to articulate, but it's early, so I think I'm partially failing at that.
No,
No,
you're
that
spot
Makes
on.
sense?
Yeah, you're spot on. That's exactly, the question that we want to look at. Like, so right now, the scale increase for the connection fees that you reference, from a 3/4 inch meter up to a 6 inch to a, to a 2 inch to a 6 inch to a 12 inch, it increases fairly exponentially. And it's based on a standard calculation that we've been utilizing from American Water Works Association. It's a fairly common calculus that utilities use across the country. But yes, we want to look at that. Those increases and those costs, are they equitable? Is that industrial user coming on to the 6-inch meter? Is that fee still appropriate based on the demands that it's going to place on the system? Or should we be looking at a different formula for those increases? Including the ADU. Is there something different we want to look at with an ADU, versus a single family house? Are the demands the same, or are the impacts the same? And so therefore that should just be one residential ERU, so to speak, or should there be a different calculus there? So we do want to look at that. We just want to at least ask the question. The answer could very well be, yep, nope, AWWA is the easiest, application, for that. And it is appropriate because it is scaling based on those impacts. We want to ask that question, make sure that we are identifying that, those impactful uses are kind of being offset and not being subsidized in one way or another by, maybe our ratepayers or our single family residential ratepayers, our residential base. So, yes, that is the question we want to look at. We want to just at least ask the question. Again, not trying to forecast what the answers are going to be, but asking the question should help us understand whether or not we've got our rates set in an appropriate way or not.
Okay, thank you.
So, as you can see here, just as that final note, we are looking at our connection fees kind of flip-flopping and actually paying more over time based on this capital program, where some of the most expensive projects are really growth oriented. And then the last thing we're going to be doing, not necessarily Carollo is going to be working on this, but our last major policy review was about 2010. There were no changes to the policies in this last water system plan development. And there are a lot of water system policies. We have over 11 pages of them that cover customer service, supply policies, regional policies. On the finance side, we have 2 pages of policies alone. And these are in addition to the financial policies that the finance department maintains for the city. So these are specific to the water system. And then there's a handful of design standards and performance criteria and organizational policies that all need to be kind of reevaluated, particularly in the context of we have a different department structure, a city structure now. We have some various changes in just operational practices that we've had over the years. Our design standards have changed over the last 10 or so years with new technology and new infrastructure availability. So we want to make sure that these things are the most current. We're not going to be, because on a 10-year review cycle with Department of Health, we want to make sure that these get looked at before the next water system plan update, which is not scheduled for the next 8 years. And so we want to take advantage of that during this rate analysis as well. And so Patrick and I will probably be going over this, taking an initial review of this, working with Steve Craig, our operations manager, and then slowly over time, as well as working with our other departments that have a connection to this, so our fire department, our finance department, and obviously our operations department or division as well. So, and then we'd be bringing these slowly back to you as we recommend any changes, and to get your thoughts, as well as on some of these pieces. So don't have anything for you to chew on with that today, but just know that over the course of this year, we'll be looking at that and want to get some input from committee on our policies for the water system as well. And that's really it. So what I had for you, and just any kind of final thoughts, anything you want us to make sure that we're passing on to Carollo to have them take a look at. We'll stop sharing now. We have had Patrick and I have both had conversations with a customer recently that was interested in our metrics, and it really kind of helped me understand better some of the conversations that's happening in the community, is to be able to describe how it is we define our rates, how we develop our rates, and what some of the thoughts are that go into that. Because as I was having that conversation, I realized that we were having two different conversations, and I was talking about our structure of our inclining block and how that works and what the rates cover, and they were more interested in how did we design the rates from a standpoint of affordability and equity for our customers. And so in addition to not only that conversation, the work that our DEI consultant that's been working with Mike Matlock's group and some of the other city folks, one of their recommendations was to look at these studies from Texas A&M University and consider what that might do or how that might inform how we set and build our rates moving forward too. So that recommendation has come from a couple different areas. And that's why one of the reasons we want to have Carollo take a look at that. Patrick, was there anything you wanted to add?
Good morning. Well, one of the things that I think is really, or the 2 points that I think are really great about this project, one, that they're doing the cost of service study at the same time as looking for a new source, which will obviously increase or start a lot of expenditures for the water program. So I think it's very timely to do them together. I think that the 2 points that Dan made, the dashboard that they're going to develop for us, that allows us to continually put in the change of cost of the services as rates increase, or not rates increase, but the cost of materials, the cost of labor, everything increases, that we can keep that dashboard moving forward. And then when they do the equitability cost of service for the different types of customers, we can see how those increases in cost will be put towards the different customers. So I think that those two components are really going to be vital for us to make a good decision moving forward in how we establish our rate payment system.
Okay. So I had some questions. So right now, how is it currently broken down? Does multifamily pay as much as a residential customer, as much as like a business or industrial? Do we have to charge different rates for use at this point?
Yes. And so I'm going to try and pull up, at least on my side. Well, of course, that's not going to work. What the rates are, but yeah, we have the inclining block rate structure. So that's primarily applied to our residential customers. Theory being, the more you use, the more you pay. And as we know, in the summertime, our water rates, or our water use can triple, and that's primarily due to irrigation. And that's really both on the residential side as well as the commercial side. The commercial rates, however, are a static rate, and we do that for for business purposes, having kind of a consistent business awareness of what your costs are going to be. But they don't start at the lowest rate, tier 1, like our residential customers will. They'll start at tier, I believe it's tier 2. So they're already kind of starting at an elevated cost to recognize that the commercial nature of the use of that water. And so so for an example, our for the first 600 cubic feet of water, which is a significant amount of water. I want to say it's somewhere like of 250 plus gallons a day, where we're seeing our average customer is about 200 gallons a day in use for an average household of maybe 2.5 residents, kind of a thing with irrigation needs, about 200 gallons a day. They're starting at $3.02 for each 100 cubic feet in that first block. So the first 600 cubic feet of water, they're charged $3.02 per 100 cubic feet. On the commercial side, that would bump up to $3.34. But that's a static rate for those commercial customers. They will never bump up to that third or fourth block in those cents. Now, if you're a commercial customer and you also irrigate your property, you would have a separate meter to irrigate your property, because you're also paying sewer costs based on the volume of water that you use on your domestic meter. And so the commercial customers don't want to pay for sewer costs as it relates to irrigation. And so they generally will install a separate irrigation meter, and that irrigation meter is actually paid at the higher block of block 3, which is $3.99 per 100 cubic feet. And so they're paying basically not the highest block that we have, which is block 4, which is where we charge for our consumption at our water fill stations. So if somebody wanted to fill up a truck full of water, they'd go up to our fill station, they would pay that highest block. But they'd be paying at that block 3. So again, that's also another piece we want to look at from an equity standpoint or an impact standpoint. Irrigation, should we be setting that at block 3, or should that be a block 4 as a non-essential use, particularly as we move into drier periods? Water is harder to come by. Should we be charging more for those non-essential uses, in allowing folks again to let the market make decisions around water use, where more essential uses are priced lower and those non-essential uses priced higher?
I
Does
think
that answer your
about
question?
kind of, I was just thinking like how just down the street we've got Pepsi, and just what their rates, what tier that they would be at, because I assume that they draw a significant amount of water.
They do, and so they pay that consistent rate at block 2, so that higher block. They don't move big based on their volumes into block 3 or 4. But they do pay a significant amount of rate for our system, which helps also keep our costs lower for our residential ratepayers, because the more revenue the system has in general, the more ability we have to pay for our regular operating costs, our O&M costs. And so we have a significant user that pays a significant amount of revenue, which then overall, when you look at the bucket of money you have for your O&M, it helps us keep rates overall affordable for the rest of the system.
Okay. My other question is, how far do our water lines then run down Little Rock? How far do we go down? And then Old 99, how far do we have currently water going to?
We don't currently run all the way down Little Rock or all the way down Old Highway 99. I believe we're getting closer on Old Highway 99, and the work that we're doing around with the reservoir will help us to get to that farthest extent in that corner of the system. Although I don't believe we're there yet, and I don't have a map readily available for me to share with you. But we are continuing to build our system, both through just our projects where we have new customers coming online. If you're a large customer or you're a large subdivision and you need water, you have to extend those water mains to that project. And so it's generally through that process is how we extend our water mains. And when, where it's feasible, the city itself could look at, where do we want to extend a water main or a sewer main as well, in that vein of thought.
Okay, so then at that point, then the contractor would help offset the cost then as far as putting the line down there.
Right.
Like we did with the camp, like the camp out there, they helped pay for the water lines when we did I can't
Correct.
think of the name of the camp. So, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, so developers would pay for that. They would then deed those assets over to the city, and then we would take over operation and maintenance of those items. And that's in addition to paying for those connection fees that they pay for the connection itself of having the water come in.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is that after we with the project on Israel Road and having to replace some of the water lines there to different size, I don't know how this all works, but would you just like, does it make sense to do a 12 because, you know, in 20 years we're going to have more so you don't have to go back and replace things? I mean, how do you guys estimate for that?
So that was both a project that would that was a city driven project. That wasn't a developer driven project. If it was a developer driven project per se, and let's say that the developer itself needed, you know, a 2-inch main, you know, for that project to serve their project and their needs. But the city's water system plan, because you might recall we model what the water system needs in certain areas to make sure that water can move from one area to the next. It can have fire flow coverage, things like that. So we might say, well, there's a 6-inch main that we need, you know, through that arterial. And so therefore the city would try and participate to the extent that we have budgeted funds available, an oversizing agreement with that developer. And so we would require the developer to install a 6-inch, even though they needed a 2-inch. And we would try, you know, where we had budgeted funds available, we would make up that difference for that developer in that project. Where it's a city defined project, you know, let's say we have a 2-inch main in the roadway and we really need a 4-inch main or a 6-inch, you know, the city would then just pay for that project because that's helping us meet a deficiency, whether it's in, you know, a water quality based issue or a fire flow based issue or a quantity based issue to be able to supply from a pressure standpoint. You know, we would upsize that. That would be in our kind of our, you know, that would be based out of our rates. That's not a growth based project. That's really an operation based project. So we'd be looking at, you know, funding that in our capital program based on the revenues we receive out of our rates, not necessarily out of a capital or out of a connection fee type scenario.
When we do an oversize, like in that hypothetical, would future users, let's say there's another development that goes in down the street and the 6-inch main means that they didn't have to expand it, would they then be paying the city latecomer fees, so we'd be getting some of that money back in the future, or would they just be paying connection rates?
That's a good question, and I might have to check with Brandon on whether or not there was a connection fee. Let's say we had an undeveloped lot and the city had installed a water main across that frontage. I believe that they would pay a latecomer fee to the city, which doesn't expire. But Brandon, is that accurate?
So it's not just whether or not they have service, it's redevelopment potential. So essentially the easy answer is yes, there can be special assessments placed on the properties. They are in perpetuity, unlike a typical latecomer agreement. And ultimately, if there's a single family lot, they have service, but they have future development potential, then that assessment does apply to the parcel, but it would not be charged until the future development occurs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, and I think about like on 79th, how far the water goes down, because we've got some areas down there that are not on city water. And then what predicates that? You know, when do we decide that the cost benefit is better, you know, that we should extend it that far? Because they're not, are they on city sewer as well then when they're out there? The ones that are on private wells or private water systems?
The same scenario. If there is development that would bring that water main across that frontage, or if there is a need for the city to extend that water main, you know, in both cases, there would be a latecomers, you know, or a special assessment fee applied to those parcels to bring those services to those properties. You know, in the instance of the sewer system, you know, that's obviously something we're still looking at, is how do we extend sewer mains into areas where it might be a residential neighborhood. You know, what are the impacts there? Because it is a very expensive process to make sure that those neighborhoods can get sewered. So, you know, as as you're aware of, we're looking at, Velcomen and what does it cost to bring sewer into that neighborhood. Same kind of questions and same kind of funding issues exist, for water and sewer in in an area that it doesn't currently exist, unless, of course, again, development might be downstream. We'll be extending that across where there is some other need for the city to actually extend its mains. So if a private individual is on well and on a septic and there's no motivation other than a particular property owner's desire to be served by public services, then it would be up to that property owner to extend those services to their property. The city doesn't really have I guess, incentive to extend those services unless there's some other mitigating need, like a water quality impact or a public health issue that might exist.
Okay, I was just thinking, this is kind of random, but like when we annex, then, the city ends up with the benefit of when we do an annexation that we bring more people into the fold. I didn't know if that would apply on water rates or something, that when the cost benefit of extending water and sewer, bring more people online.
Yeah, annexations
any
don't
benefit to
necessarily
the city.
affect water and sewer services. Well, sewer, yes. When we have annexations, it opens up more servable area, but our water system service area really is our urban growth boundary. And so we are the preferred service provider within that area. So even if a neighborhood is developing in an urban growth boundary parcel, it's not necessarily technically within the city limits, they would still have to extend utility services to that development, through partnership with Thurston County, and requiring that, because we are the preferred service provider within the urban growth boundary. So our service limits currently is the UGA, and not city limits. Unlike stormwater and sewer, our service boundaries are the city limits.
Okay.
I say that and I caveat that with, we also have a regional agreement with Thurston County and the other jurisdictions that should a large development be developing within the UGA, the expectation would be that they're extending sanitary sewer, in those areas as well, and providing for a no protest of annexation forms for those as well.
Thank you. I just think about trying to reduce all those little red spots on our septic map. So
yeah, well, we're seeing, with the incentive programs that are available both from LOT and the city, we are chipping away at that. We're converting, 5, 10, 15, 20, a year, which is at a greater rate than we initially anticipated, a few years back through that septic summit work. So, we're seeing that the incentives are working. We're going to want to continue those programs in the coming years, and looking for those opportunities like we are with Velcomen to get them converted over, reducing those higher impact areas.
Okay, well, good. Well, thank you. I appreciate this presentation and answering all my questions. So yeah, this will be interesting. It'll be really fun to see the data when it comes back.
Absolutely. And please feel free, if thoughts come up, drop me, Patrick, a line, an email. We're going to be, like I said, we're going to be kicking off the Corolla here in the next couple of weeks for that particular work. We'll bring these thoughts, to them as well. And if anything else comes up over the course of the study, please feel free to just shoot us an email and let us know, and we'll try and work it in there.
And then when do we expect the results from this? What's the timeline on this?
Oh, Patrick, remind me, is it like 6 months, I think, for this phase, maybe 8 months, for this phase?
Yeah, I believe it's roughly 6 months.
Okay, because I was just curious how that'll, because you talked about the financial forecast for the capital facilities plan, if that's in time. It's obviously in time for all that. Okay. To be
so that forecast will help inform next year's CIP. Development and the work there, but we're anticipating there should be the bulk of this work done enough to be able to help inform our budget process this year.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. That was real interesting. All right, so we have reached the end of our agenda here. So do we have any additional items? Anything else that we need to talk about today? All right. Okay. Well, with that, I will call the Thursday, January 4th, 2024 meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.